Check out what the satisfied Dan Gemus real estate team clients are saying about working with the Dan Gemus team. Visit dangemus.com.
I got to thank you for being a voice of reason in a sea of insanity.
Now back to the Dan Gemus Real Estate Show on AM800.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to the show, and it is time for our famed segment with Chris Gibb from Gibb Insurance Brokers. Hey, Chris, how are you?
Well, with an intro like that, how could I be anything but in a great mood?
Oh, my goodness. Well, hope you're enjoying the long weekend. I know we are, and it's been quite the fun show today. So before we get too far, Chris, our fun question on tomorrow's show, I'm mentioning it throughout the show, but we'll really talk about it on tomorrow's show. What is your favorite Easter treat? What is your favorite Easter treat? What would you say? Are you a Peeps guy, or are you a chocolate guy?
No. I'm more of a chocolate guy. I'm a sweets guy.
Yeah, me too.
There are so many to choose from, but I will say we have one of our kids is allergic to peanut butter. So generally I'm attracted to anything with peanut butter in it.
Anything you're not supposed to do.
Exactly. Well, it's funny, you don't realize how much you miss it until you can't have it. So it's anything with chocolate and peanut butter is fine with me.
So you're the Reese's peanut butter cup guy.
Oh, Reese's peanut butter cups are, I could only eat maybe 50 of them at a time.
Oh my God. My stomach I'd be in pain if I had too much. No, I'm like you. I have a sweet tooth, so I just love anything sweet, but I pay for it. Like my stomach will literally hate me afterwards, but it's worth it in the moment. So too bad.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
I love, like I said earlier in the show, the hollow milk chocolate, just the bunny or whatever it is. But I also like, the Peeps and the marshmallow stuff. I like it all. I'm not really picky. Give it to me.
Well, Peeps, I always laugh when people mention Peeps because when my nephew was really, really young, before we had kids, my wife and I had him, we were babysitting or something, and we fed him all kinds of Peeps. And then he got home and vomited all over his bed. So to this day, my sister-in-law, whenever Peeps come up, she reminds me of that transgression.
Still pay for it. Oh, my goodness. Oh, you know what, though? That's too bad. It was worth it, I'm sure, at the time. The kid loved it.
At the time, it kept him quiet, so,
Full of Peeps. That's amazing. Okay, so listen, today's topic is actually a very interesting one. And we have, with Nikki's house, with Nikki's parents' home burning down a couple of years ago, this is something that definitely would have helped them at the time. So let's talk about our topic today, which is all about the importance of taking an inventory of everything you have in your home.
Yes. This is something that I've always suggested to people. And with today's technology, it's just so easy.
Sure.
And your in-laws are I don't want to say a perfect example, unfortunate example, but if you get home and you find that your house has been broken into, or God forbid there's been a major fire, after the shock, one of the most stressful things is the insurance company is going to ask for a list of everything that's missing.
Yeah.
And at that stressful time in your life, it's going to be almost impossible to start writing these things down. So I always suggest to people is take your phone and video your house. Just walk through the house, videoing each room, opening drawers and cabinets and closets. And then you store that video on the cloud somewhere. And God forbid, if you ever had to think about it, you would have a point of reference.
You don't realize, and again, having gone through it to try and help them along the way as well over, a year or 2 years ago, like you said, it's very overwhelming. And what we found helped with, in their case, was just literally going room by room and imagining, trying to remember what they had in those rooms. But there came a point where, they would forget a whole bunch of stuff. In the middle of the night, they would wake up thinking, you know what, we had all these things under the bed, or all these things in the closet, in boxes, or in the attic, or whatnot. And it became very, very overwhelming. So I could imagine that, reviewing a video or even pictures would definitely help. But you said the key is going into the drawers and like just the kitchen. You don't realize how much stuff they have packed away, the small appliances, it's just the beater and all the utensils and just the plates and the Tupperware. Like Nick's mom had thousands of dollars worth of Tupperware and just over the years, right? So all that kind of stuff, it all adds up pretty quick.
Exactly. Like at our house, we've got so much Tupperware, but apparently we can never find the lids, but that's a whole nother problem. But exactly, like how many pairs of socks do you have?
Yeah.
What, how full was your freezer? What was the make and model of your appliances in the kitchen? So it's just one of those things, especially on a long weekend. You're sitting around with not much to do. You just walk around with that video camera and you can really give yourself something that'll help spur your memory, God forbid, if you ever have to use it.
Many people often talk about the difficulty of, finding an item that is similar to what they had because they may have purchased that table or that couch, years and years ago. They no longer have it, or in some cases they have furniture that has been passed down from generation to generation, which it just means so much. It can't be replaced, right? But it can be difficult.
Exactly, and that's the whole idea of replacement cost in your insurance is they're going to replace it with what we call like, kind, and quality.
Yeah.
So again, it becomes important to you're walking through the basement and where did we get that chair and what kind of couch was that exactly? And it really helps. You can just sit and rewatch the video. And it just helps you in a very stressful time to make things a little bit easier.
There's one thing that I am thankful for our generation where, if our parents' homes, like Nick's parents, obviously, they lost everything. They lost all the photographs, the kids' photographs, some of the grandkids, but luckily we had a lot of them. But in our case, we grew up in the age of cell phones. Once we had our kids, we had cell phones, and all of our photographs are in the cloud, right? So that's one thing I'm thankful for is we wouldn't miss things like that for the most part. But I can't. And again, those things that can't be handled by insurance. That's nothing. Insurance can replace pictures and memories.
You just can't. My parents had a basement flood years ago, and they lost literally thousands of pictures of my brother and I and family members. And it's so important to think about, and not only in a fire, but even in a flood, where do we have these? Where are these memories stored and how can we make them more secure? Whether it be, oh, sorry.
I was going to say maybe get them off the floor. If there's a box on the floor, if it floods, get them up on the shelf. It doesn't help in a fire, obviously, but in a flood it would.
In a flood, definitely, because, we can put everything in plastic totes, but as soon as you get a few inches of water, those totes are going to flip over. Yep. So if they're up on a shelf, they're secure. You have to think about what can happen and how can I prevent it from being worse. I always say the more you prepare for a disaster, the less likely it's going to happen.
No doubt. Now, Chris, well, we have a few minutes here. Let's talk about the process. So again, I've been in it. We actually, sadly, we know quite a few people who've had house fires over the years. And it's been devastating for them. So let's talk a little bit about the process. If something were to happen, what is the first thing that you would do? Obviously, the fire department comes out, puts out the fire. Like, what's the process for someone?
Well, I mean, the obviously the fire department comes, they put out the fire, and the fire damage is one thing, but then you've got the smoke damage and the water damage from all the fire department. So the first thing is you contact your insurance broker. I mean, nothing ever happens between 9 and 5 Monday to Friday.
Not, yeah.
But the first thing is we have to secure the home. So there's disaster restoration companies that will come out and board up the house and maybe tarp the roof if it's burned through the roof. And then you have to think about, well, where are we gonna stay? Do your insurance company, there's coverage generally in every home insurance policy to pay for additional living expenses. So rent you a hotel or rent you another place until you can get home. What do you do for your clothes and your toothbrush? You can't usually take that with you. So there's a lot of emergency work that happens. And then the long process of coming up with a dollar value to replace everything. And
that's the tricky part.
That's the tricky part. Believe it or not, this is kind of strange, but sometimes it's easier to deal with big claims than it is to deal with small claims. Yeah. Because with big claims, they're assigning senior adjusters. There's obvious damage and obvious causes. So, and the insurance companies bring their checkbook to write checks for emergency items and to get you started on getting your life back together.
Now, in some cases, Chris, the insurance company adjuster might basically just offer you a payout, right? Just to kind of not have to go through the trouble of, itemizing your list. But that necessarily won't always work to the homeowner's benefit. It depends on the situation, I'm sure.
It depends on each situation. It's again, you have to approach this as you're never, as much as we try, you're never going to be back to where you were.
Ever. Yeah.
Because money doesn't replace memories. So it's difficult. But again, the more you prepare ahead of time, the better off you can be. Does your house have replacement cost coverage? Have you done any renovations that might change the value of your house? Are your contents sufficiently covered? Don't just look at the price when that paperwork comes in. Look at the paperwork, and if you deal with an insurance broker, any good insurance broker will take the time to explain it, to review it, to make sure that all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed so that you've got a solid policy. Don't just look at the price, look at the coverage.
It's like everything in life, right? We don't look at the small details until something happens, whether it's a flood, whether it's a fire, life insurance, whatever it is. Oftentimes we just say, okay, yep, how much, like you said, what's the number on that? What's the price? It's fine, sign off on it and be done with it. Not think about it again. But until you haven't, something happen and you wish you had looked at that closer.
Well, and you're 100% correct, Dan. And it's funny how many times I sit with clients and we start to discuss the policy, and then the conversation goes into directions where you never thought. Well, I have this expensive bike. Is it covered? You start that conversation. So it's good to sit down, review this stuff. Because that piece of paper that your home insurance policy is written on, that's all you're going to have when the worst happens. So you want to make sure that it's as accurate and as, I'll use the word, plentiful as possible.
No doubt. Chris, we've got a minute left here. Lots happening. Obviously, Chris, owner of Gibb Insurance Brokers, but also Deputy Mayor of the town of Amherstburg. Anything to discuss over the meeting this past week at Town Hall in Amherstburg?
Well, lots of interesting things. We had to buy a fire truck. We're redoing some walking trails in Jack Purdy Park in the Monopoly subdivision. One of the big things that came out of this week's town council meeting is Amherstburg has worked extremely hard over the last 15 years to really get its financial house in order. And there were some items that went over budget, and thankfully, the work of past councils and past town staff, we've got the money in reserves to take care of that. So it's really was a good news story, financially at least, in the town of Amherstburg.
Fantastic. And obviously everyone's talking about the policing discussion. It's still in the early days, obviously, I'm sure, right? And there's just some research being done from Town Hall's standpoint.
Yep. We're keeping all options on the table. We want to, this is going to be a once in a generation. Well, I shouldn't say once in a generation. It was once in a generation back in 2019. And now we find ourselves looking for another option. We're going to take a look at every option available and hopefully council will choose the one that's in the best interest of the future of Amherstburg.
I'm sure everyone will do just that. So listen, Chris, if anyone has questions about their policies, if they want to get a free quote, what's the best way to reach out to the Gibb Insurance team?
The best way would just be shoot me an email, chris@gibbinsurance.ca, or you can go online, get a quote online, gibbinsurance.ca, or even if you're old-fashioned like Dan, you can call the office. 519-736-8228 anytime, and we can work you out a quote or answer questions or do whatever you need.
And Chris, you do realize if something ever happens to my house, I don't care what time it is, I'm coming over and I'm knocking on your door. You realize that, right? I know
You know what, Dan? I have a pull-out couch in my basement that is ready for you and Nikki to sleep on. Yeah, all five of us and the dog.
We're coming over.
There you go.
All right, Chris Gibb, thanks as always. Looking forward to chatting again in a couple weeks.
All the best, Dan, and have a great Easter.
You bet. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this, right here on the Dan Gemus Real Estate Show.